Several issues to discuss today, several topics of concern. That's why this is America's Forum, after all. And one of those issues needs us to turn our focus away from domestic challenges to see what's going on overseas. We have had a situation where it is safe to say that relations between the United States and Venezuela continue to deteriorate. Right.
Earlier this week, President Obama, as some of you may have heard, issued and signed an executive order declaring Venezuela a national security threat and ordered sanctions against 7 officials.
So, Venezuela, a national security threat? For more on this story, let's call on our former ambassador to that country, Otto Reich, who is the president of Otto Reich Associates, and our friend Pete Hoekstra remains in the conversation as the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, both gentlemen joining us from Washington, D.C. Ambassador, it's good to have you along. Is Venezuela really an extraordinary threat to our nation?
Well, thank you for the invitation. The language that the White House used, which in the views of some people sounds a bit alarmist, using words like emergency and national security threat, actually owes to the legislative basis for the president's action, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which uses that kind of language, allowing the president to take certain actions if he feels that an unusual or seriously threatening set of circumstances exists related to a particular country. In the case of Venezuela, I think you can make a case that because so many of the high-ranking officials of that government are involved in illicit activities like money laundering, narcotics trafficking, they're hiding literally billions of dollars, hundreds of billions, in fact, of dollars in our financial system, or hiding them in dollars in other countries. You could say that this poses a threat to our financial system. Regardless, I think that the president was correct in sanctioning these individuals. These are not sanctions directed at the government of Venezuela, the country of Venezuela, but only a few people who have been involved in either that massive corruption or in massive violations of human rights. Now, you could make you could criticize the administration, in fact, for using that language and then only sanctioning 7 individuals that are not even the highest ranking, but that may be something for another question.
Well, speaking of, there's a lot to discuss with you, Ambassador, and that's why we're very grateful you're going to stay with us, as will Pete Hoekstra, because it's interesting to hear the Ambassador talk about this as a financial threat with the oil in Venezuela, but there are also some geopolitical considerations here, including a very cozy relationship between Venezuela and Iran. When we come back, we'll ask Pete Hoekstra, given his background on the Intelligence Committee, just how realistic that is. And of course, the expertise of Ambassador Otto Reich will likewise be called on yet again as America's Forum continues on this Thursday from Newsmax TV. So stay with us.
I just want to take a moment now. First of all, welcome back to America's Forum. I just want to take a moment now. We've been talking about what's been going on in Ferguson. Earlier, I had talked about Darren Wilson being found innocent. He was actually never charged. As you may recall, a grand jury decided not to charge him with any criminal charges, so they decided not to indict him. I just want to clarify that. A lot of legalities behind that, but I want to be sure that we're clear that he was not found innocent because he wasn't actually charged.
And we will continue to monitor the developments in Ferguson as 2 police officers were shot there early this morning. Had a press conference involving the St. Louis County Chief of Police and more on that. But we need to continue our conversation now with 2 gentlemen who know very much whereof they speak. That would be our former ambassador to Venezuela, Otto Reich, and my former colleague in Congress, Pete Hoekstra. Gentlemen, thanks. Both of them joining us again from Washington, D.C. Pete, you may have heard me before the break. Otto was outlining economic challenges we face that could be interpreted as national security challenges. I'm interested specifically, Pete, based on your background in the Intelligence Committee, the cooperation, I'll call it that, between Venezuela and Iran. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's been very, very public. That's an issue that the intelligence community and the intelligence committees on the Hill were very concerned about and continue to be concerned about. Obviously, Iran has had its wings clipped now that the price of oil has dropped by, roughly 50%. But the relationship with Iran, Hezbollah, provides kind of a beachhead for the extremist regime in Iran, extremist Islamist elements into South America, obviously a track to Central America and into the United States. We didn't like it. We were always concerned about it, and we continue to be concerned about it.
Peter, I just want to get your thoughts. There have been some speculation that a lot of these countries are just working together. Do you believe that?
Oh, I believe that Iran and, Iran is reaching out. It's spreading its tentacles. It's using a lot of the tools that it has available to go and reach different parts of the world. And I think, yeah, these countries absolutely are working together. Is it a coordinated, sophisticated mechanism of coordination? Not necessarily, but it is definitely a sphere of influence in an area where these regimes have come together in terms of moving in a similar direction, which is anti-American, anti-West.
Ambassador Reich, let me just ask you one more question in terms of the relationship between the Venezuelan people and the American people. With the ongoing difficulty, is there a tangible, virulent anti-Americanism now in Venezuela?
No. There is only on the part of the government and the government elites, the military, part of the military, certainly the people who have benefited financially from the enormous corruption in the last 15 years under Chavez and Maduro. But the Venezuelan people are not anti-American. In fact, there was an article this week in the Miami Herald that answers your question precisely. And it says that Maduro's highly charged anti-American rhetoric is finding no echo in the general population of Venezuela.
So mindful of that, Ambassador, let me ask you politically, how much longer is the current ruler of Venezuela going to remain in charge, in your opinion?
Well, JD, that's a very difficult question because we can look around the world to see other repressive governments that have also destroyed their economies, Cuba, Zimbabwe. I mean, the list could go on for a long time, and yet the government's managed to stay in power because there is no freedom. People can't, if they rebel, they're jailed. In some cases, they're killed, or they leave the country. So there is no easy answer to your question. We can only hope that the international community, such as it is, will put pressure on Venezuela to stop the repression, to go back to the democratic roots that it promised, this government promised when it came into office back in 1999, and that the Venezuelan people will be allowed to have a normal democracy again.
Ambassador Otto Reich, we thank you for your insights on the situation in Venezuela. It's something we will continue to monitor, and there are more